For today's video, we'll be taking a look at AMD's latest Zen 5 X3D gaming processor offering, the Ryzen 7 9850X3D. Let's go through the specs of the 9850X3D and run some benchmarks to see how it performs against the OG 9800X3D. In terms of specs, the 9850X3D is pretty much identical to the 9800X3D. They're both 8-core parts with 16 threads. They're built on the Zen 5 architecture and utilize AMD's 2nd Gen 3D V-Cache technology. In case you're unaware, as per the animation on the screen, the said 3D V-Cache sits beneath the Zen 5 CCD. This is in contrast to the older 7800X3D and the 5800X3D, where the 3D V-Cache is layered on top of the CCD. With the 3D V-Cache now being located beneath the CCD, the 9850X3D and 9800X3D's core complexes are now better able to interface with the processor cooler, thereby paving the way for faster base clocks and boost clocks as compared to the older 7800X3D. That said, both the 9850X3D and 9800X3D come with 96MB of L3 cache and feature a TDP of 120 watts. You might be asking then, what exactly is the difference between both parts? The answer is a 400MHz increase in max boost clock. That's it. The 9850X3D has a max boost clock of up to 5.6 GHz and a base clock of 4.7 GHz, whilst the 9800X3D has a max boost clock of up to 5.2 GHz and a base clock of 4.7 GHz. Right, so not the most exciting in terms of product launches. Let's unbox the processor and run some benchmarks. To put the 9850X3D through its paces, I've set up a test bench with the following specs that can be seen on the screen, where I'll be pitting it against the 9800X3D using the same test setup. For the benchmarks, we've got everything on stock vanilla settings. That means no curve optimizer, PBO whatsoever. We do of course have Expo enabled on the DDR5 6000 CL28 memory modules by G-Skill and resizable BAR switched on as well. In terms of OS, I'm using Windows 11 Pro 25H2 with all the latest updates and drivers installed as of the time of publishing this video, and VBS was enabled too. In terms of benchmarks, I'll be testing the productivity performance of the 9850X3D and 9800X3D using 7-zips compression and decompression benchmark tests, Cinebench R23 and Cinebench 2024, as well as the Corona 10 benchmark. To get a brief flavor of gaming performance, I'll also be testing the gaming performance of both processors using a suite of 6 in-game benchmark tests with an RTX 4090 GPU at 1080p high settings. We've got Assassin's Creed Mirage, Black Myth Wukong, Cyberpunk 2077, F1 23, Far Cry 6, as well as Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Thereafter, just to see how the performance of these two processors would be like at maxed out graphics settings and maxed out resolution settings, I'll run the built-in benchmarks for these 6 games at 4K using the highest possible graphics settings. Before we begin, if you're new to the ALK Tech channel, do consider subscribing so as to keep up to date with the latest product releases in the PC hardware world. With that, let's get on with it. To kick things off, let's take a quick look at the clock behavior, thermal performance, and power consumption of the 9850X3D when under an all-core workload. While running Cinebench 2024's multi-core test, the 9850X3D ran at around 5.2 GHz across all 8 cores, achieving an average temperature of 94 degrees Celsius, a low of 68.4 degrees Celsius, and a high of 95.4 degrees Celsius, while achieving around 143.8 watts of power draw on average when looking at the CPU package power metric via Hardware Info 64. For the 9800X3D on the other hand, it ran at around 5.1 GHz across all cores, achieving an average temperature of 89.9 degrees Celsius, a low of 77.8 degrees Celsius, and a high of 91.5 degrees Celsius, all while achieving around 144.3 watts of power draw on average. Just as a reminder, these results were achieved using a Thermalright Phantom Spirit 120SE ARGB CPU air cooler in a non-air conditioned room with an ambient temperature of around 29 degrees Celsius. And with that, let's take a look at the 7-zip compression and decompression test results. With the 9850X3D, the test bench achieves an overall score of 144.274 giga instructions per second, compared to the 9800X3D's 143.165 giga instructions per second. Moving on to Cinebench R23, we see that the 9850X3D attains a multi-core score of 23,187 and a single-core score of 2,222. The 9800X3D, on the other hand, puts out a multi-core score of 22,752 and a single-core score of 2,096. With Cinebench 2024, the 9850X3D achieves a multi-core score of 1,383 points and a single-core score of 143, and the 9800X3D a multi-core score of 1,349 and a single-core score of 135. Rounding off this section on productivity benchmarks, the 9850X3D achieves a score of 8,470,768 rays per second with the Corona 10 benchmark, and the 9800X3D a score of 8,273,837 rays per second. For gaming performance, first up, we've got Assassin's Creed Mirage. We're using the game's built-in benchmark tool on the 1080p resolution at the high preset. The 9850X3D is 0.8% slower than the 9800X3D in terms of average FPS. Bumping up the resolution to 4K and the graphics settings to ultra high. Once again, the 9850X3D is 0.8% slower in terms of average FPS. Next up is the Black Myth Wukong benchmark tool, where at the 1080p resolution on cinematic settings, the 9850X3D achieves the same average FPS of 144 as the 9800X3D. On the 4K resolution with the same cinematic settings, we get the same average FPS of 70 for both processors. We've definitely hit a GPU bottleneck here, seeing how the performance of both processors at 4K is pretty much identical. Moving on to Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p high settings. The 9850X3D is 2.1% faster than the 9800X3D in terms of average FPS. At 4K resolution on the Ray Tracing Overdrive preset, we get an average FPS of 73.74 with the 9850X3D and an average FPS of 73.49 with the 9800X3D. And given how similar the minimum and maximum FPS figures are, this points to the RTX 4090 GPU being the performance bottleneck. With F123's in-game benchmark test at 1080p high graphics settings, we see that the 9850X3D is about 0.9% faster than the 9800X3D when it comes to average FPS. Turning up the resolution to 4K and the graphics preset to ultra high, the test bench achieves the same average FPS of 79 for both processors, once again indicating that we've hit a GPU bottleneck here with the RTX 4090. On the 1080p resolution with high graphics settings, Far Cry 6's in-game benchmark sees the 9850X3D beat the 9800X3D by around 2.2% in terms of average FPS. On the 4K resolution and bumping the graphics settings up to the Ultra preset, we get the same average FPS of 123 with the 9850X3D and the 9800X3D, which is once again indicative of a GPU bottleneck kind of situation. Finally, to round off this section on gaming benchmarks, with the 9850X3D, we get an average FPS of 379 when it comes to Shadow of the Tomb Raider's in-game benchmark at 1080p with the high preset, and an average FPS of 365 with the 9800X3D. At the 4K resolution with all graphics settings maxed out, we once again hit a GPU bottleneck where both the 9850X3D and 9800X3D achieve an average FPS of 91. And with that, no surprises here that the 9850X3D's performance isn't earth-shattering, considering that the key difference between the 9850X3D and the 9800X3D is just a 400 MHz difference in max boost clock. With the productivity tests that I've run, we get a small uplift in performance across the board as a result, while in terms of gaming performance, for instances where the CPU is the bottleneck, we do get a small amount of performance uplift with the 9850X3D over the 9800X3D, though with Assassin's Creed Mirage, we did get a minor amount of performance regression with the 9850X3D when compared to the 9800X3D. On that note, let's talk about pricing. The 9850X3D will have a MSRP of $499 and as of the time of publishing this video, the 9800X3D is available to purchase for a price of around $469 from sites such as Newegg. With that in mind, $499 for the 9850X3D is an okay price, I suppose, but it isn't a super attractive price either, especially given the amount of performance difference that you get when comparing both parts, and the fact that the 9800X3D is still $30 cheaper. If you don't mind coughing up that extra $30, the 9850X3D is undoubtedly a great gaming processor in the grand scheme of things. Intel's Core Ultra desktop processor offerings still remain uncompetitive from a gaming standpoint. Alternatively, if you're feeling more adventurous and hands-on, you could probably get a 9800X3D still and do a spot of manual overclocking so as to try and get similar performance to a 9850X3D. With that, thank you so much for watching, hit the like button and get subscribed if you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys around the next time.